Actually, I've had somebody come up to me quite recently, a brand new person at a meeting, and say, look, I go to lots of places and I'm now coming to you, and they're all telling me what they can do for me. And you're telling me what I can do for others.
Absolutely.
And that's an essential facet of spirituality. And then you can look at the other things like gaining peace, finding truth, all the other things that are part of it, because there are many parts of it, but they all add to that service that you give in the end. And in the end, now, a person is defined by their service, the service they give.
The Spiritual Freedom Show with Richard Lawrence, where politics is not the answer, materialism counts for nothing, and spirituality will set you free.
Richard, great to be here with you.
Great to be with you, Darren. And can I just say, before we start this time, I've got no idea what you've got in mind there, but isn't it great when we get the questions? I know some of the questions you pick out are from other sources, but by and large, they're from people who've contacted us. And we really appreciate them. They're fantastic questions we're getting. So thank you all very much for sending in your questions, your points, your comments. You're making this show what it is.
Absolutely. I mean, it's great to see people engaging with the teachings and even with the practices and bring questions to the table as well. I've got an interesting one here today, I think. One that really stood out to me, and I wanted to bring it to the show. This person says, in one word, what does spirituality mean to you? And I love that because I thought, yeah, it's totally true. I mean, when people talk about being spiritual or, you know, saying that they're a spiritual person, what do they really mean, actually? What are they talking about when they say that? And I think there's a lot of different points that came out of this discussion. You know, some people talked about truth. Some people said, well, it's about love or about a connection, or it's about a greater awareness, or it's about inner peace. And I thought, okay, there's a lot to unpack there in terms of okay, what do we really mean, or what does spirituality really mean?
Yeah, I'm going to come up with the word that hasn't been, they're all good ones, but the word you'd have to use now, and it's the third freedom in the 9 freedoms, and it's service. Yeah, totally. And that's the revolutionary point now. Yeah. And it should be, I mean, a lot of people say, well, that's pretty obvious. But actually, I've had somebody come up to me quite recently, a brand new person at a meeting, and say, look, I go to lots of places, and I'm now coming to you, and they're all telling me what they can do for me. And you're telling me what I can do for others.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's an essential facet of spirituality. And then you can look at the other things like gaining peace, finding truth, all the other things that are part of it, because there are many parts of it, but they all add to that service that you give in the end. And in the end, now a person is defined by their service, the service they give. Service is the jewel in the rock of attainment.
Yeah, I think, coming to this point about service, I think, it's when we look at, these other points about what is the essence of love and what is the essence of truth, okay, your realization of oneness and how this oneness is born, this true love for all things that could, because of your deep realization, and then what is the natural product of that?
I mean, it's interesting because love, the real love, is the energy of love, if you like, is the second freedom, and you need that. You won't be able to live a life of service, predominantly service anyway, shall we say, without love. Because you won't have the motivating force to do it. Within you. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of people take to the path of service. I've seen many people take to the path of service and give fantastic service and then appear to run aground, to run out of motivation, to sort of lose it, you might say, go off and leave the path. And they do that, I believe, because they've stopped. And it can happen to all of us, this tendency to kind of lose the motivation at times. And we have to keep that flame burning, and we feed it with love. So you need the love, absolutely. It's an energy we all need to fuel the flame of service.
Well, just going, let's go through the one just before that. Let's go back to bravery.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a very spiritual thing, bravery. Yeah. Indeed. I suppose you could say spiritually is defined by the 9 freedoms. That's the definition of spirituality now.
Absolutely. And it makes me think about the relationship as well between bravery and love. Because, if we think about the opposite of bravery being fear, I mean, can you really love if you're in a state of fear? It is. You're right, because the first 4 freedoms, well, actually we're told
at the beginning, they're not necessarily given in order of importance.
Right, okay.
So
Yeah.
I think this must apply particularly to the first four, or certainly the first three. You need bravery always, even after you manifest love, while you give service, to find truth, to break free from the imprisonment of psychic inability. That there's a fear of our own psychic abilities that a lot of people have.
Yeah,
We need bravery to break free of that, bravery to recognize truth, bravery to change your life when even your closest people in your life don't want you to do the right thing, which will happen at some point, and you're karmically fortunate if it doesn't happen. Let's put it that way. So bravery is a very spiritual thing if it's applied again in love and service.
I think one other way, we can look at the term of 9 freedoms is that these later freedoms, certainly, they give these amazing examples, in interplanetary existence and Saturnian existence, solar existence, of beings who are doing something extremely spiritual, which is this constant service, in the case of the sun, for example, to all life in the solar system.
Yeah.
And maybe we can talk about a little bit, about their example and what, how they give real meaning to what spirituality is about in the world.
Well, they don't. They don't go off on vacation, let's put it that way, or else, we'd all be in trouble, that life would die in the solar system. They are totally dedicated, and they're totally dedicated also to what you might say, their master, which is the Logos of the sun. And they're totally in tune with the Logos of the sun. They are actually the rays of the sun. I'm now talking about the beings who inhabit the sun, are its very radiance, rays. There is an attunement on all the other planets, on Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, obviously especially Saturn, but all of them in this solar system with their own Logos, which we don't have on Earth. We have a bit of ecology, but we don't do ecology for the most part for the sake of Mother Earth. We do it for the sake of ourselves. And people always say, I'm doing this for my grandchildren and my children. What about somebody else's children, somebody else's grandchildren? Never mind, the best motive you could have for ecology is for the Mother Earth herself. And this attunement with the Logos of our planet is a massive spiritual deficit. We need that. That lack is very, very poor. Will have to be rectified. And the ancient Greeks who worshipped Gaia, Mother Earth, were absolutely way ahead of any church who worships even the beloved Master Jesus, or any organization that worships even Sri Krishna, or even the Lord Buddha, or whatever it might be, all of which is a wonderful thing to do, to praise these great beings. But it falls short of Gaia, the Mother Earth, who is even greater, as they would be the first to know, than they are.
So not just because of her advancement, but because of also what we owe to her.
We owe to her. We are part of her fabric. We are little motes on her back. She is a living being, a living, breathing intelligence. So at the core of spirituality, just as it is on other planets, would have to be our relationship with our Logos, with the Mother Earth, and what we're doing about that. In the Ethereal Society, we are doing something definite about it through the missions we perform. I'm not saying nobody's doing anything, because there are people who revere Mother Earth, I'm pleased to say, and worship and praise her. But it should be every man, woman, and child on Earth, because without her, we wouldn't have experience as we know it. And also, of course, the sun. Because without the sun, we wouldn't have life as we know it at all. We are solidified sunlight.
It's an interesting way, because a lot of people would look and say, well, that seems very primitive to think about.
They would.
It seems almost unscientific in a way, doesn't it?
It does. Well, the sophisticated scientific brain can be, I'm not being dogmatic here, the most limited one. But there again, there are people who've entered the field of science, and through that science have discovered religion, God, or even a Taoist belief, or whatever it might be, because they've seen, some of them anyway, the fabric of creation cannot be haphazard. There is a design there. And there are those who've seen this sort of ecological balance of Mother Earth is beyond chance, and the life as we know it. I mean, we talk about life beyond this world. And there are now, we know, planets in what they call the habitable zone, outside of this solar system, which could be capable of supporting life, even as we know, intelligent life. So that idea, we're completely unique, has gone, even as a theory, even as a scientific theory. But of course, they don't stretch their minds, and this is a gross limitation, to life beyond our own physical type of existence. And that's, again, is just because of an assumption. It's not science. Right. It's an assumption that the only life that could exist is life as we know it. Yeah. Why?
Yeah. I think we often give... obviously, I am a massive supporter of science, but I think sometimes we over-credit it with this understanding of the universe, whereas I think any real scientist will say that this is a process of inquiry and discovery, and there is so much yet more to discover that they have not been able to explain yet or discover yet. And I think we need to... It's a process, isn't it? I mean, we only have to look back 50 years, 100 years, 500 years to see that our scientific understanding of the world was so limited, and by extension, how limited must it still be today?
Yeah, I mean, I did an interview some years ago on a station in Britain called LBC. Oh, yeah. And the other guest was the person we call in this country the Astronomer Royal, which is like the most senior. His name is Martin Rees. I'm not sure whether he still is. He might be. I think he might be in the House of Lords. I don't really know. But at that time, he was doing an interview, and the interviewer was really hoping to get a big Barney going between me and him about life on other planets. And he said, well, there could be life on Mars, there could be life on Jupiter, there could be life on Saturn, which disappointed the interviewer a lot. I don't think he meant life in the way that I would believe as life. But he was open to life on all those planets. And I said, what about the sun? And he drew the line there, which we wouldn't draw the line even there. Sure. But yes, some scientists are very much moving, you might say, in a spiritual direction, because they have to. Don't think it's a question of choice. It's a question of things that can't be explained. I mean, how can you talk about 96% of the universe being invisible matter, dark energy, and still not believe in invisibility, in invisible energy and life? You can't. An invisible matter, which one time would have been completely ruled out by some scientists as a thing. Right.
I think, just bring it back to another one of these words here. So we talked about love. The next one that someone had here was awareness. And I wonder, as their word for spirituality, I wonder if unpack that a little bit. I mean, to what extent is awareness really kind of the essence of what we're talking about here?
It's crucial. I mean, the essence of what we're talking about, I'm going to come back to this, is service. Right. And you mentioned the sun. The sun doesn't go off, as I'm sure it could do, into some sort of state of awareness and focus on that. Yeah. What it focuses on is enabling all life in this solar system and helping life outside of this solar system. So that's true spirituality. That's the greatest being we really feel, if you might say, the radiations from, and it's demonstrating service. But awareness, of course, enables you to serve more, and service makes you become more aware. Because you used a word earlier, experience. Yes. And that's absolutely critical. Of course, the big mark of spirituality is giving up your free will. Extremely unpopular on Earth. It's an absurdity on other planets that people would choose free will. They don't choose free will. They know that it doesn't lead you anywhere. They know that it leads you it leads you away from freedom. They are two opposites. It's not doesn't mean you're not doing what you want, by the way. In fact, you are doing what you really want, what your higher self really wants. Yeah. But it means that you're not doing it just because I want to. I want to do this. A lot of people on Earth, all they want to do is assert themselves and their free will. I chose this, for better or for worse. The song "My Way." And it's actually a good song, isn't it? I mean, and very well sung by Frank Sinatra. So it's not about that, but. It is one of the most popular songs I hear at a funeral in Britain and maybe in other countries, because I think people just like the way I did it my way, even if it's really bad for them, even if it really went badly wrong for them. I asserted my ego, my whatever, and this was me, and I, etc.
I never thought of
and
that.
all of that. The spiritual person does it God's way, not my way, but God's way.
Play that at my funeral, please.
That's the next song.
Yeah, I did it God's way.
I don't know who'll sing that one,
Yeah.
but not because they might not call it God. I mean, I might call it karmic way. As opposed to the karaoke way. But, they'll go down their own path rather than going down the right path. It might be the one I want. It might not be the one I want at the moment, but it's the one I will want because it's in tune with my higher self. And the higher self is the direction we're headed.
Yeah, I think it's good clarification because a lot of people think, well, if we're giving up my free will, am I just sort of like handing my life over to someone else? How do I know that's the right thing? Is that the right path? But I think what you're saying here is it's being more in tune with our own higher self and the direction of that through our life. Yeah. And ultimately, in tune with karma and with God's will, I suppose, for our life rather than thinking that there's some other person or some other organization that you're about to hand over.
Now, in the end, it's all about union with God.
Yes.
That's what yoga means.
Yeah.
And the original title, we still have it today, a little booklet called Contact Your Higher Self, which you're talking about, through yoga. And that's the journey. And the ultimate destination is to be one with God, to know God, to be united with God, to know that I am God, I am divine. But the pathway there now is service, and it really, really works. And prayer really, really works. You don't stand up and pray for yourself, or some people do actually, but that's not the best way to do it. Yeah. You do it for the people who need it. Yeah. Whatever that cause may be, and that really works for them. But it really works for you too. So because it brings us internal spiritual transmutation. In the second freedom, it's stated by Mars Sector 6 that if you really, and this is from my memory now, sure. If you really manifested love correctly, you'd manifest it through the heart center, the throat center, and the Christ center in balance. It's not that the lower centers are of themselves wrong. They're essential. Right. It's that they're overused or wrongly used. I see. There's an imbalance. Yeah. We are driven, really, for the most part on Earth, by the lower centers, the psychic centers in the solar plexus and below. Right. Generally, we need to rectify that balance. And the best way to do that is through service and prayer and giving others and then supporting that with the practice. It's just like a beautiful synergy. Yeah. You're raising the energies higher, which enables you to be motivated to serve more and more effective in your service. And then by your service, you'll raise the energies higher as well. Yeah. Yeah. But what the service does, it adds the missing element in the old practices on the whole, which is the physical, concrete element, which is why they went to such tremendous lengths. I mean, you're not going to be tempted by money if you haven't got any. So they picked up the begging bowl. Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to be tempted by sex if you're not in the company of whichever sex it is that particularly attracts you, and so on. This was known, there's a logic to it, and they went out of their way to isolate themselves from all forms of temptation, and it was a shortest route to advancing themselves. But sooner or later, all these things, all these basic elements, these activations of the lower centers out of balance, not in balance, because we need the balanced activation of them, that will have to be transmuted and risen. Every transmission, I get off topic a bit, but there's one or two transmissions that were given through Dr. King by being from Jupiter, mainly one called Jupiter Sector 9-2. Yeah. Possibly only by him, I'm not sure of that, but mainly, certainly. And the most common word in it is rise. Which is actually why we have a meditation album called Rise, because it's it was named after that. But it's all about raising the energies, and that's really in one way another word for transmutation. Yeah. If people say I want to rise above my problems, or rise above this, or rise above this dispute, or what have you.
Yeah.
And they do it generally, people, including me, I've done this myself, through detaching from it at that moment. But it's not enough. Detachment might be essential. I was on a TV show not so long ago when somebody pulled a stunt, and it was an annoying stunt. It could have been annoying, but there's no point getting annoyed on TV.
Yeah.
So therefore, you have to detach and just get on with it, and and so on. But in the end, though, if there is annoyance, if there is frustration, if there are desires and so on, whatever it might be, they all have to be transmuted for you to really enter. And so I would say the person with the begging bowl in some future life will have to come back without the begging bowl and still fully transmute materialistic desire.
Yeah. If only to prove that they can still do that within the context of
for their own
the
sake, actually,
exactly.
Not for just to master, to transmute.
Yes.
You don't transmute an energy that you've blocked off.
Exactly.
It gets you, maybe, I'm sure it got them to a certain level. It did in certain cases, to a very high level. But in the end, they have to come out of the retreats, out of the caves, and they have to give service.
Yeah, I think it's a very deep point, actually. I'm sure people can find a way to relate that to their own life. The fact that, these things, they can't just be detached from, they have to be transmuted.
Yeah.
Just bring it back to another word here. What place do you think there is then for this person to describe inner peace and tranquility? And we talked there a little bit about how it's essential to go within. But this inner peace, is there, how does that relate?
I think it's very, very important, as a matter of fact. It's something you have to be willing to give up. Let me just say that.
Yeah, that's an interesting take.
But you can't give it up if you haven't found it, can you? You're not giving it up then, are you? So you have to find it and leave it. Okay. This concept we have, because also the deepest and highest state of peace is an enlightened state. Yeah. So there's, at that level, the two become pretty similar. But you have to leave it, and you knowingly, when you enter peace, you're not going to dwell in it. And by the way, you shouldn't want to beyond a certain point. And if you do want to, and some have, try to maintain their level of peace, maintain the level of bliss they've attained, and never leave it, and there are some people who even teach that, then I think they won't advance beyond a certain point. There is, in one of the freedoms here, a mention of people on this earth who, and it's stated, I think, in this way, the energy is still warm in certain centers. Yeah. And I would say that's because they haven't yet detached sufficiently and transmuted it sufficiently and moved on to another level. And it could be because they're still bathing in the blissful state that it brings, the great inner peace that it brings, the powers that it brings. All those things ultimately have to be controlled, detached from, and transmuted. But the person who enters peace, there should come a point where they're really not at peace. Yes. Because of what's going on in the world, they actually are awakened, and they have to engage. Now, I have actually, this might sound really odd, I have, in a very humble, small way, because I have not been there, but I have a certain empathy for people who were taught through the millennia that when you enter nirvana, you amalgamate with God or Brahma or whatever you wish to call it. And that's it. You're then absorbed into the universal state of being, and never will you leave it. I have empathy with them because if they get advanced enough, they might well expect that to happen. Now, for most people, it's not a problem because they never get there. So it's, frankly, so it's motivating them to get there, and that's probably why it was allowed to go on. I see the point. But if you actually did get there, you're expecting never to have to engage again. You might leave your physical body and project from it and think it doesn't really matter. I'm going to absorb back into you don't have a concept of transmutation of all matter at that time. Yes, I'm going to absorb back into the universal oneness. What does it matter? And then you find, actually no. I don't know how long it might take. It might take, for all I know, you might remain in that state for years. intermittently or permanently, I just don't know, or on another realm. And then you'll sort of realize, oh gosh, no, actually it goes on. I have to leave this.
Yeah.
But you weren't taught that.
Yes.
And you had that teaching was permitted in certain places and went on, and you'll still find it today. And it's not true. That's what the 9 freedoms tells us.
Right.
We leave nirvana, as it was called, or cosmic consciousness, or heaven. True heaven isn't a place after death. It's an inner state. We leave. That's why the keys of St. Peter are the keys to your inner self.
Yeah.
St. Peter was a great, and still is, of course, he's not from this world, but a great, great mystic. And not as he's depicted at all in the. That's one big historical error, the way he's depicted. So this is a great state, but you go into it on the basis, this isn't permanent. So the answer, long-winded answer to the question, yes, you do need inner peace. You really need it to bring peace. If you're praying and you're angry, or you're jealous or you're emotional, it will discolor the energy of your prayer.
Right.
First cometh the angel peace, says the Master Jesus in the 12 blessings, to make way for the goddess love. So you need to find peace, but you need to also know when to leave it.
Yeah, that's a really deep insight. And I think what it also tells me is that not only is service right, but it also kind of emphasizes the inevitability of it in a way, and that it kind of brings us back, to this one-word concept. What is spirituality really about? All of these roads are either with the motive of or lead us to service. I mean,
you know what I love? I love the fact they all come together.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there isn't like a conflict.
Exactly.
Like when I'm concentrating on myself and my own development, I'm doing it because I know this will enable me to serve more.
Exactly, yeah.
And so therefore it's not a selfish activity if it's done in the right way at the right time to the right degree.
Exactly.
And then when you come out, that's going to lead you to next time to a higher state of enlightenment or peace or bliss or whatever you want to call it. And it's a total, complete concurrence of these 2 aspects of going within and then going without.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, it's Darren here. Thanks for tuning into the show. Now, if you enjoyed that episode, don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom from the 9 freedoms. If you'd like to find out more about the 9 freedoms, about Mars Sector 6 by Dr. George King, go to our website, that's aetherius.org. Richard and I love hearing from you, receiving your comments, your questions on your spiritual experiences, and talking about them on the show. So do write to us, share them with us at spiritualfreedom@richardlawrence.co.uk. Always remember that service is the jewel in the rock of attainment. See you next time.